Welcome to part 2 of the Q&A. This is going to be questions 76 to 151, I think. If your question is not in this part, it was probably in part 1. If it is not in either part, well, then I'm probably going to be doing a full video on it. Or I missed your question. I don't think I missed any, but hey, it's possible because there were so many questions. If you think I missed your question, just, drop me an email or drop me a DM on Instagram, and I would just answer it in person because that is probably going to be what is easiest. So, question number 76, how often should exercises for a particular muscle group be switched up? I've been doing bodyweight dips and pull-ups for many months now, and I do not get sore at all after a difficult workout. Is this preferable, or is it indicative of suboptimal training? I think it is suboptimal, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. If you're doing only body weight for dips, pull-ups, inverted rows, push-ups variations, it's going to be hard to progressively overload, and so you're going to have to be doing higher volume. However, you sort of run into a brick wall after a while where you're not getting sore because there's not more tension than last time. It's just sort of equal tension and doing more work. And plus the movement pattern is always the same, and so it's not really stressing the muscles in a new way. You can definitely keep a good amount of muscle mass just doing bodyweight dips and pull-ups. You could maybe load a backpack and use pull-ups and dips that way. It kind of changes the movement a little bit, which also might help, or it might feel a little bit too awkward. I would say investing in some way to increase the intensity is going to be absolutely vital. During quarantine, I did 3 months. Only dips, pull-ups, inverted rows, and push-ups variations for the upper body. That's about all. And, I was still in good shape, but yeah, I wasn't getting sore. Even though I was doing 10 sets of dips to failure, I would feel nothing the next day. Just nothing at all. Same thing for pull-ups. I was doing, 10 sets of 10 to 15 and, with full range of motion and just nothing. So, try to load it more heavily if you can. But at the end of the day, if you're only doing home workouts, it's not going to be optimal just because you're missing out on a ton of good exercises. Number 77, I recently read that the muscles that are pretty much worked all the time to stabilize the body, such as the sternocleidomastoids, like the neck, because you're always using your neck, otherwise you obviously... Anyway, calves, because you're walking, I assume, are resistant to growth, while pecs and quads, etc. are not, so they respond well to training. Is this true? If yes, do we need to train these muscle groups differently? I would say possibly yes. Those muscles tend to be slow twitch for the reason that you gave, because they're being worked on a very consistent basis all the time. Like your pecs aren't under tension when you're just sitting there, but your neck is, and your calves need to be able to do a lot of work over a long period of time. So they tend to be more slow twitch, they tend to respond better to higher reps, and they tend to be very resistant to damage, and they tend to recover very quickly. So I would say those types of muscle groups would be better for higher volume, they would be better for higher reps, and they're generally very resistant to work. And so I think, doing a lot of work, a lot of intensity, close to failure, beyond failure, and just attacking them is going to be the way to go. Number 78, your thoughts on the brutal Smolov cycle 3-week program for bringing your bench press up. So I did a full video on Smolov. I will link it up there or in the description. And it is brutal. Okay, it's 4 sets of 9, 5 sets of 7, 7 sets of 5, and then the day after is 10 sets of 3. So it is really, really rough. It's some of the hardest training that I've ever done. But by the end of the cycle, I was doing 10 sets of 3 with my previous 2-rep max, I think, which is absolutely nuts. It's tough. It's really, really tough. If you've had any kind of shoulder issue or elbow issue, probably just give it a miss. One good thing about it is it shows you how much brutality that you can survive from, but also thrive from. My one rep max went up quite a bit, and I think it can work, but definitely don't do it all the time, and you have to listen to your body, and don't be afraid to scale things down. I think there's a Smolov Junior type of program, which might be better, especially if you've never done Smolov before. Number 79, as a beginner with 1 dumbbell, how do I do things like deadlifts? That's a little bit tricky. You can do a suitcase deadlift where it's just to one side, but that's sort of more of an advanced exercise. You really need to brace your core to make sure you're not getting any kind of weird twisting going on. So maybe that's not a great option if you're a beginner. You could do one-legged deadlifts, like an RDL, where one leg is going to swing back behind you and the other one is, it's going to be working the hamstring, the glute medius, and you can load that with one dumbbell. I think that could be a good option. But I would say maybe stick to split squats for now, or buy a second dumbbell if that's a possibility. But ideally, deadlifts are not done with dumbbells. They're done with a barbell and plates. I think that is almost always the better way to go. Number 80, I'm training in a pretty intense sport, MMA, 5 to 6 times per week, and have to keep my lifting sessions a little brief. How much am I missing out on gains if I'm not doing accessory lifts like arm work, leg extensions, shoulder raises, etc.? Well, you can make excellent gains just on the compound movements, and you really do have to auto-regulate and titrate up your volume or down your volume based on how you feel. If you're just wrecked all the time, and MMA is going to be tough, BJJ, any of this kind of stuff, CrossFit, all of this is going to be really tough on the body, and it's going to impact your recovery. If you're doing excessive amounts of cardio or just activity in general, it is going to take a toll, and something has to give. You can't run a pure bodybuilding program because you're adding stuff on top of that, and you just won't be able to recover, especially if you're natural. So I would say, cut down on the fluff work like leg extensions. You don't need leg extensions, just squat. It's going to be completely fine. But I think something like a little bit of arm work, like how hard is it to recover just for doing like an all-out set of curls and then an all-out set of extensions and then maybe an all-out set of lateral raises? That shouldn't be too tough to recover from. Just don't do like 5 or 10 sets or 15 sets, because that's when you run into trouble. 81, have you ever ran a marathon? If not, is that something you're just not interested in, or would you ever consider running one? Actually, the longest run that I've ever done is 24 miles. I had intended it to be 17 or 18 miles, and I got lost, so it ended up being 24 miles, I think. 23 to 24, somewhere in that range. Took like 3 to 3.5 hours. I forget the exact time. I lost all my running training logs. But I don't know. I'm not really interested in long distance running. I tend to I'm a little on the bigger side when it comes to that. I think 90 kilos and up, running gets to be a little bit not that great. I was like 68 kilos at the time, so it's a lot easier on the body. But even then, with my hip issues, with my sports hernia, with my past injury issues, I don't think me in a marathon is really going to be a great idea. Plus, honestly, I'm focused on other stuff, and marathon training is like the absolute worst thing that you can do for hypertrophy. Number 82, how do you determine failure on exercises with no standardized range of motion like rows? So yeah, this is a little bit tricky. I would say it depends. So it depends on your school of thought. Some people define failure very, very easily. So, if they're doing a row and they're in a very retracted position, and this part is really difficult, this last couple inches of range of motion. And so the minute they can't do this, they just call it failure. And I guess it is failure in some way. But if you cheat slightly, you can get more reps. And honestly, hitting failure on rows, if you're extremely strict, is not even that hard of an effort. These people are like, oh, I failed the last rep. Yeah, you spent like 2 seconds trying to grind through that last little part, but the muscle is not really done, because this entire part of the range of motion is still strong. The muscle isn't really 100% fatigued. It's just fatigued in that part of the mechanical range of motion. So I would say it's up to you. It depends. Be safe. If you're doing something like a barbell bent over row, maybe call it a little bit earlier, but on a chest supported row or a Helms row or a machine row, something like that, you can go to failure with the full range of motion, and then, cheat a little bit, or, probably better just to do, maybe a few partials at the end. And I think you can get benefit from that. So it really just depends where you want to define failure and how hard you are willing to push it and what you can recover from. I think the most important thing is going to be to have some level of consistency. If you write down in your training log 10 reps with rows and it's super strict, and then the next week you do 15, but the last few were like pretty sloppy, that's sort of dishonest. and don't cheat yourself out of gains by being all over the place in your training. Pick one, see what works for you, and then be consistent with it. Next one, what is the first program you ever ran? I think it was Smolov, actually, which is a horrible idea. It's definitely not for beginners at all. And yeah, so probably not advised, not a good idea. I think just a basic 5x5 program, starting strength, strong lifts, whatever you want to call it, they're all just sort of variations, tweaks of the same thing, is a good idea for most beginners. You don't need a custom plan if you're a pure beginner. I mean, maybe it can help, but I think just do starting strength, follow it basically to the letter, and then once you plateau, you can, you gain the knowledge to see how you respond to the basic movements and what you might want to change in the future. But if you go right into like your own custom plan, I don't think that's really optimal. And that's basically what I did. I basically just programmed from myself for the entire time, my first few years. And, I made really good progress, but I don't think that's optimal for a lot of people. All right, number 84. Do you attack Ryan Humiston out of jealousy or genuine concern for the people who consume his content? Good question. I have never felt the emotion jealousy in my life. I know that's something, if someone is a naturally jealous person, they might not believe me. But if I see someone with more subs than me, or more views than me, or more followers than me, or more money than me, or who has more muscle than me, I don't feel that emotion. Maybe in some cases admiration, but I've been in social media long enough that I know that's not really a good comparison. Everyone is running their own race. If Ryan Humiston has, I don't even know how many subs he has, 600,000, 700,000, 800, maybe not 800. I think he's around 500,000. But, that's his path. That's not my path. And so if I do a video on anyone, it never ever comes from a place of jealousy. If it's praising them, if it's criticizing them, it is primarily criticizing their decisions. So their information, the information that they are putting out, the products that they are selling, in some cases like FitTuber, but it's not coming from a place of jealousy. It is critiquing the information that they are putting out. All right, number 85. How much muscle can an overweight novice lifter expect to gain while recomping? Same body weight, but definitely way stronger over their first year of lifting. Again, it's going to depend. I would say they're not going to gain as much as if someone started when they are lean, just because that person can eat in a caloric surplus and they can gain a little bit more. But you can definitely gain muscle when in a deficit, especially if you are a higher body fat percentage. Giving a number is going to be tough. I would say in a year, at least 5 pounds of muscle for sure. Perhaps even closer to 10 in some cases, but it just depends on how much stronger you get and your body fat percentage and a lot of other variables. So it's hard to say a certain number. It's also even hard to measure because you're going down in body fat and up in muscle, and so you don't know how much those are canceling out. So it's hard to say. If your body weight is exactly the same in a year, you might look way different, but it's hard to say exactly how much the composition has exactly changed. And this is where DEXA even or some other ways to measure might not be that good. So it's really hard to actually give a solid number. Next one, how do you know when you're not getting enough protein? Good question. And honestly, you don't. It's not like you feel a lack of protein. You might not even feel weaker in the gym or anything like that, just because the limiting factor is often not protein anyway, so that can be really hard to measure. I think most people actually have too much protein. I think 0.8 grams per pound, 0.7 grams per pound, or 1.6 grams per kilo is generally going to be enough. You can go a little bit higher if you want, but it's going to be individual as well. Like if you look at a study or a meta-analysis, there's going to be people who actually make excellent gains on way lower than that. And there's going to be people who eat more than that and actually lose muscle. These outliers who just, for whatever reason, maybe they weren't sleeping well, maybe they have shit genetics, maybe their training sucked or whatever, their protein was high, but they got fuck all in terms of muscle. And then other people, they have very little protein, and then actually, for those other reasons or some other reasons, they do really well, and they put on a lot of muscle comparatively. So I don't think there's going to be all that much of a relationship between more protein equals more muscle, especially past a certain point. I would say as long as you're getting in 30 grams 4 times per day, you're probably okay. That's probably not going to be what the limiting factor is. And then past that, especially if you're natural, what are you going to do? Go to 40 grams 5 times per day? I mean, and especially past that, for a younger person, not going to be a big deal. Maybe if you're older, you might want to up the protein a little bit to get through that anabolic resistance. But, I would say if you're not progressing, protein is rarely the limiting factor. Number 87, should you hold your scapula retracted while doing pulling exercises? So I assume you mean vertical pulls, because a row is a little bit different. When you're rowing, I would say, yeah, you can get scapular protraction, retraction, because that's part of the movement. If you keep your scapula retracted and you just move your arm, it's going to work your scapula, but it's not going to fully stretch and contract those muscles, which you want to do when you're rowing. However, during a vertical pull, the angle of pull is different, to try to really engage the lower traps, the mid traps, etc. But during the pull, how do you retract the scapula when you're pulling like this? It would just make a very awkward movement. So I would say don't worry about the scapula during most of the range of motion, and then maybe at the top, if you want, you can try to reach your chest to the bar, that kind of thing. But for most people, that's going to be the weakest part of the range of motion. So if you want to focus on the lats, I would say don't worry about all that much retraction, because that's sort of making the limiting factor of the lift the lower traps and the rhomboids and those other sort of chest putter uppers. Yeah. Next one, I work out with the rings, and I'm having problems with calluses. Do you recommend gloves or straps for it? I'd say probably gloves, but maybe straps, or maybe just suck it up. I don't know. I think all might be viable strategies. I have very little experience with rings, so this is going to be one of those questions where I just don't really know. And I'll be honest when I say I don't really know. The next one is 1.2 grams per kilo of body weight enough for fat loss. I assume you mean protein intake. There's no protein here, but my body weight is 71 kilos. Again, 1.6 grams per kilo is what I usually recommend. But if you're lower, it's not like you can't gain muscle. It just might be a little bit slower. And again, plenty of people make great gains off of that much protein. So it really just depends, and it might be the limiting factor. Generally speaking, the more protein you give your body, the more is going to be converted to glucose. The more it's just going to be basically wasted. And so I would say 1.2 grams per kilo might not be optimal, but yes, you can still gain muscle, and yes, you can still lose fat as well. All right, the next one, do I have to do HIIT or steady state cardio besides walking and weightlifting in a caloric deficit to lose weight? No, you don't have to do cardio at all. I haven't done any kind of formal cardio in a long, long time. So, and it's not like I'm shredded, but like I'm fairly lean and I'm healthy. And so I would say no. If you have to do cardio to lose weight, it means your diet is probably not up to par, unless you're trying to get like shredded to the bone. But for most people's goals, I would say cardio is not 100% necessary. It can maybe speed things up. It can definitely be good for health in some cases, but I don't think it's going to be necessary, especially if your diet is on point. 91, what are your favorite exercises for rear delts? I would say skiers. I did a whole video. It's basically not quite a row. It's like a straight arm row, and you're leaning forward, and you can maybe even see the delts. Can you see the rear delts popping? I mean, it's like, it's not a rear delt raise because you're not out here, you're tucked in, but it really just gives a ridiculous contraction. I did a full video. I'll link it up there. But that's probably my favorite one. Rear delt raises, any kind of row. A lot of it is being able to feel the rear delt work. If you are lat dominant, your lats will probably take over, but learn how to actually engage the rear delt and to finish with that. Lat work and rear delt work, a lot of times there's a lot of overlap, but I would say there's a difference for most people, and learning how to feel that difference is going to be really important for rear delt growth. Second part of the question is, And how can I fix elbow burn when doing dumbbell pullovers? I'm not sure why your elbows are burning. You might be using the long head of the tricep, which is completely normal. That's just going to be what is acting on the shoulder as well. But I'm not really sure what you mean by elbow elbow burn. Maybe get some elbow wraps. I don't know. Number 92, who is your favorite fitness YouTuber other than yourself? You didn't have to write other than yourself. I'm not really a narcissistic person at all, as far as you know. But I would say Sean Nalawani, Geoff Nippard. Actually, you can see all of my subscribers. So you can actually go to my channel page somewhere, and it can say, maybe it'll say channels or something, and you can actually see who I'm subscribed to. And I'm probably subscribed to V-Shred, and I'm definitely subscribed to Athlete X. Just I have to know what is going on in the industry. But generally speaking, that is a good list of people to consume content from. It's no guarantee. You can probably come up with some example that I do not agree with, and I'm just subscribe to them because they are a big channel or something. But I think that's a good place to start to find out the content that I consume. You can also check my Rate a Fitness YouTuber series. If I am praising them, I probably consume their content on a regular basis. So yeah, that's a good place to start. And who is your favorite non-fitness YouTuber? I would say Mr. Beast, maybe PewDiePie. I don't really consume a lot of non-fitness content just because I'm really busy. But I like Mr. Beast because he seems, as far as I can tell, like a very genuine person. He doesn't seem to be fake. A lot of his stuff is clickbait, but he always follows it up with over promising and over delivering, or he under promises and over delivers, even though it's a clickbait video. And he seems like he's doing good things, and he has a lot of success. He has a very unique business model. Any money he makes goes right back into his business, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, he's doing things the right way, as far as I can tell. Next one, good day. It's a very medieval sounding greeting. How do I exercise my quads when I have knee pain from squats and groin pain from split squats? That's tricky because that is like the creme de la creme of the best quad exercises. Maybe play around with light knee extensions, leg extensions, perhaps some very controlled lunges, maybe goblet squats. Check your depth, check what your knees are doing. Leg press might also be a good option, but I would say don't do them the way I do them, where my feet are very low. Put your feet higher, which is going to be less quads, but it's still some quads. It's going to be more hamstrings, a little more glutes, but you're still going to be getting a decent amount of quad activation. And it's going to be easier on the knee joint. So, yeah, if you have knee pain, growing big quads is a pain and a half. Maybe try low bar squats just because you're sitting back more and it puts less stress on the actual knee joint. But, yeah, that's a tough situation. So, salute to you for actually going for it. Number 94, how much % of your training knowledge is in Sweat, which is my book? 5%? 10%? It's a really good 5 to 10%, but, even if it's 66,000 words, I've probably put like 1 million words or more into my Quora. I have 2,500 answers, 500 words per answer would be 1 million to 1.25 million. So, yeah, I would say 5 to 10%, but it's the 5 to 10% that is going to be really good and really useful for beginners, for intermediates, and then advanced athletes can still get something from it for sure, but they're going to want to be more involved in their own training. It's really hard to say a certain percentage just because, how do I just take all the knowledge out of my brain, spread it across the table, and, analyze which parts are in a book? Yeah, so I would say maybe 5 to 10%, but, it's a brain. I don't know. Like, it could be 1%. It could be 0.1%. Number 95, road to 10K subs achieved. Thank you very much. Congratulations, man. Thank you. Question, how important is the difference between high-low rep range or varying rep range between sets for building muscle? So I would say it is important. If someone is only doing sets of 5, I don't think they're going to max their muscle growth. Same thing if they're only doing sets of 20 on the extreme. But in the middle, I would say you don't have to vary your rep range that much. If you only did sets of 8 to 12, provided they are damn hard sets on the right exercises and you're progressing, I don't think you need a ton of variation. If you're in that sweet spot, 8 to 12, 5 to 15, somewhere in that range, it's a pretty big range, then it should be okay. I don't think you ever need to go below 5 to build muscle. I don't think you ever need to go above 20 to build muscle. But I think if you're only doing 18 to 20 reps or only doing 5 to 7 reps, you might be losing something at the other side. But if you're close to your genetic potential, like, you can get within 90% of your genetic potential without doing a whole lot of stuff. So it really depends on your goals. Are you a competitive natural bodybuilder who is trying to eke out that last few droplets of your potential, or are you just a guy who wants to look good and wants to look fine for the beach and be active and be healthy and have some muscle? It's completely different when you're assessing those two different situations. Pronounce my name. I assume you're Hawaiian, right? Number 97. I remember you saying that to be a good athlete, you must have strong glutes and hamstrings, but what about the quads? Aren't they equally, if not more, important than the two of them, especially for jumping, being quick on your feet, etc.? And if I want to get faster and more explosive, which of the three should I train the most, or should I train them all equally? Hope you see this. Don't worry, I see all the questions. It's not like I'm just doing this to get engagement or some shit like that. I know some channels who just put a Q&A session on a pinned post, but then they never actually read any of that shit. I hate that. It's so fucking disingenuous. So I do see all the questions. Anyway, so I would say no. Especially for sprinting speed, the quads are not going to be as important as glutes and hamstrings. Hip extension is the name of the game. Knee extension is happening, in a jump as well, but it's not going to be what actually propels you forward. That has to be hip extension, especially the glutes, and then, the hamstrings as well. And then the hamstrings are also going to be curling the leg and then, controlling it during the recovery when you're sprinting. For jumping as well, I think it's a lot of hamstrings. It's a lot of Achilles, which is going to be genetic. But I wouldn't overthink this too much. I think, specific quad training to try to be more athletic is maybe not, a bunch of leg extensions isn't going to make you more athletic. Squats can, but again, squats are using all those muscles together, so it really isn't just isolating one muscle group. And I wouldn't try to balance your quad hamstring work based on a certain proportion. Just try to get stronger quads and stronger hamstrings. There's no reason you can't have both. It's not like you have to settle on a certain ratio. You can have both, and I think you should have both if you want to be the best athlete you can be. Plus lateral stability, adductors, abductors, core work, etc. All of those combine, and you can't just focus on one too much. Number 98, how did you manage to do 15 reps of pull-ups, and how long did it take you to train for it? I've been struggling to increase pull-ups reps. I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember. I think it was maybe after 2 or 3 years of training. And pull-ups are a weird thing because you can get a shitload of reps by just, doing middle reps, and I think that's what I was doing at the time. And doing them properly, full extension, chin actually over the bar, could I do 15 reps right now? Yeah, I think, especially with a neutral grip. But I don't think I would be able to do 20. I think my personal best is 16 or 17, somewhere in that area. And that's with a pause over the bar, it's with a pause at the dead hang, etc. So if you do them properly, 15 pull-ups is a very, very respectable amount. If you cheat, I think my cheated number is 35 pull-ups or something ridiculous, because they were middle reps, they were just feeling the lats, just sort of pumping back and forth, and you can really get a ton of reps doing them in that way. But I think it might not be optimal for growth. Next one, how often should someone take a week off from lifting, and is it age dependent? I take 1 to 2 weeks off twice per year. For Chinese New Year and then for Chinese National Day, we usually either go traveling or go back to my wife's hometown, and so I don't really have access to a gym usually, or if I do, maybe it's a crappy hotel gym or something if we're traveling to Southeast Asia or somewhere. So I just use that as like the ultimate deload. And, I would say there's nothing wrong with taking a week off every 2 to 3 months. But if it's like every month, that's when you run into maybe issues with consistency and with progress. But it really just depends. They've done studies where I think they did 6 weeks of training, 3 weeks off, and 6 weeks of training. And then the other group did just 15 weeks straight, and both groups got the same results. So I think especially for beginners, taking occasional weeks or two away from the gym isn't the end of the world. And as for whether it's age dependent, I'm going to say no. I think older lifters sometimes need more recovery, but just taking a week off usually is not the answer for that type of situation. You should stay active, you should keep training, but you might want to deload more often, especially if you're feeling beaten up. It really just depends. You have to play it by ear. I have some older clients who are very, very resilient, and other ones who, they need more deloads or more recovery time. So it really just depends. Age is only one factor. I also have some younger clients who, they can't handle as much volume, and so they have to reduce more often as well. So it really just depends, and age isn't the only thing. In your opinion, has the best physique of all time? I don't know. I don't really think about that kind of stuff. Aesthetics is a personal thing, and I don't even, after me, it's like, who cares, I'm going to say not Arnold, just to piss a bunch of people off. Next question. I'm 17, natty. Makes me sad that you have to qualify the fact that you're natty when you're 17. Oh my god, the world is a fucking mess. About 16 to 17% body fat, but I think I have gyno. Okay, that makes sense. How do I differentiate whether it is gyno or just fat, specifically in my lower chest? So gyno and chest fat are related. If you have high estrogen and maybe low testosterone, or maybe high testosterone, they could relate. I had gyno when I was like around 14 to 15. It'll be harder. It won't feel like fat is going to be soft, and so is water. It's going to feel very squeezable. Let's put it that way. Ugh. Whereas gyno, actual breast tissue growth, I feel weird squeezing my nipples on. Anyway, actual gyno is going to be much harder. It's going to be in the nipple. A lot of pro bodybuilders get surgery to actually remove the gland. And once the gland is removed, they don't get that buildup anymore. You can get gyno naturally to a certain degree. But if you see someone on stage and they're shredded and like one nipple is just like a fucking mass of just titty, then it's not natural. Like, it's just, it's a slam dunk. Especially if they're big, they're shredded, they're taking part in like an unnatural show. That's steroids, okay? I don't know why it ends up on one side, but often it's only the left or the right. It's not both. I don't have a physiological explanation for that, but it's rarely on both sides. It's almost always, I guess, birds of a feather, tissue of a feather flock together, and they all go to the left or to the right, never on both sides. So I don't know why that happens, but it definitely does. And yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much. It could just be fat. And yeah, just train hard. Try not to be too self-conscious about it. It's very easy to do that. When I was younger, I would be so embarrassed to take my shirt off. Even though I didn't look bad, I just, had just like puffiness in that area. And, so don't be too self-conscious about it, especially at 17. It's easy to do that. Just train hard and try not to be too self-conscious. All right, the next one. Why is my face chubby when I am skinny? How do I get rid of face fat? So actually, you're going to want to grab the fat. So you do cheeks, and you squeeze it. Squeeze it harder than last time. And then the jaw, and then the neck, and just squeeze. Just squeeze as hard as you can. And this is actually going to help to release the triglycerides. And triglycerides, that's a 4-syllable word, and so you can trust me. And so squeeze the fat cells, just squeeze the shit out of those fat cells, and that's going to help to release those triglycerides. and your face is going to be lean in no time. Send me a video and I'll help to correct your technique, but make sure the cheeks, and really just squeeze the cheek. No, this is mostly hormonal. It's probably high cortisol. It depends on how old you are as well. Some people just have a fatter face, but I would say high cortisol is going to be the biggest thing. So try to relax, try not to overthink it. Don't do what I just told you to do because I'm just fucking with you. But yeah, it might just be fat loss as well. You might be skinny everywhere, but cleaning up your diet might also, it also could be water retention actually. If you are eating a bunch of crap but you're not eating a lot of calories, well, you're probably going to be retaining water because you're going to be very inflamed throughout the body, which can cause you to retain water, and it's going to retain it in the face and the belly. So I would look at your diet and your stress and your sleep and maybe your training as well, and see if that helps, along with the face thing. All right, number 103, when to consider using a belt for deadlifts and other compounds in general. Blah, 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 blah. I would say there's no hard and fast rule. There's no percent of body weight or multiple of body weight. There's no weight on the bar, like an absolute load. I would say whenever you want. Just whenever you want. I've never used a belt. I've used a belt maybe once or twice. I don't really like them. I don't really feel comfortable with them. I think as long as you're braced and you know how to actually engage your core, that's going to be more important than actually using a belt. A belt might help you to do that, and it might help you to increase the amount of weight that you lift. So if you want to be a competitive powerlifter, I would say a belt is probably a good idea. It can also help your proprioception by giving you something to push against, which you might not have otherwise. But I would say if you've hit a plateau, yeah, give it a shot. I think it can help. It can help allow your body to feel more stability in that area, which allows for more muscle activation, especially in the lower body. So yeah, this can be a good way to break a plateau, but it's sort of personal preference as well. All right, 104, have you researched Bronze era bodybuilders like Eugene Sendo and George Hackenschmidt? If yes, what do you think of them? Yes, I've actually written a few answers on Quora. One definitely on George Hackenschmidt, at least one. And yeah, they were badasses. If you listen to how they trained and they were obviously doing it naturally. George Hackenschmidt actually invented the hack squat, the behind the feet deadlift. And yeah, they were basically badasses. They wrestled, they had awesome physiques, they ate whatever the fuck they wanted. They just engaged in all kinds of weird events that we don't really see today. They trained hard, they trained heavy, they trained often, usually. And yeah, I think, delving into that side of things, I think maybe I'll make a full video on old school bodybuilders and strongmen, just because I think, the modern world could definitely learn from those type of obviously natural athletes, because they actually developed pretty damn awesome physiques, obviously naturally, and they were really fucking strong too. All right, 105, what are the things that you recommend before starting a YouTube channel? So first, think about what you want to get out of it. Is it just a hobby? Is it just for fun? Is it just to communicate with your friends? Or is it a business? Are you doing it for the ad revenue? Are you using it to drive traffic to your website or to sell a product? So really decide in advance how serious you want to be with it. I don't have ads on my channel, but maybe I will in the future, especially if YouTube sort of forces me down that way. But I would say decide early if you want to or not, especially if you want to get to that 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers. I think, that is a good benchmark to seeing if you are serious about YouTube. The second one would be quality content, and being consistent with your uploads and not just uploading fluff content. The majority of channels that I see that are under 100 subs and complaining about not being able to grow, their content sucks. I get bored after 30 seconds, or there's really nothing engaging about it, or they're just boring as fuck, or they're just regurgitating what other people say. And so if you want to build an audience and retain an audience, I think you have to have quality content. And you also have to be pretty consistent about it. You don't have to upload as frequently as I do, or Greg Doucette does, but I think, once a week is pretty much a minimum when it comes to uploading frequency. Maybe if you're a bigger channel, a little bit less often if you already have a lot of subscribers. but the algorithm is not going to help people find your content if you're not putting out a lot of content. That is part of the reason why I put out content on a very regular basis. The other thing I would say, and this is one thing I've sort of failed at, is find a way to drive traffic towards your channel. Organic search is like completely dead. I did a poll actually, and 3% of my viewers came from YouTube search. A lot came from Quora, a lot came from a shout out that Sean Alawani was nice enough to give my channel in a video he did. Some obviously came from the Doucette thing recently. But without those, I would not be growing much. I'd have like 2,000 subscribers when I've made hundreds of videos. So even if your content is quality, you can't expect the algorithm to not dick you over, because it will. So find another way. It could be advertisements, it could be social media, it could be friends and family, but find a way to get to that first 1,000 subscribers, and then maybe it gets a little bit easier from there. But even at 10,000 subscribers, I'm not getting a ton of organic growth. I'm not really placing in search for all but the most obscure terms. I have a Yates row video that placed in search, upper lower split that placed in search, and apart from that, videos about other people. Athlete X placed well in search, Humiston, and then the FitTuber one. But apart from that, just like a normal fitness video, just gets absolutely buried in the search results. So you can't really rely on organic growth. You have to be really proactive when it comes to growing your channel. But you also have to have quality content in place anyway. Otherwise, people will go to your channel and just think, oh, there's nothing here because there's nothing there, and they won't actually subscribe. All right, 106. Is it true that after 4 to 5 years of training, you can't build much muscle mass? Yeah, I'd be happy to gain 1 to 2 kilos per year of actual muscle tissue, and stuff does slow down quite a bit. My first year, I gained 15 kilos. Not all of it was muscle, but a lot of it was. So, things do slow down considerably, especially if the first 4 to 5 years was optimal or close to optimal. If you had a shit 4 to 5 years, yeah, maybe you can get a spike of growth when you implement progressive overload or higher frequency or better technique or just better diet or whatever you were lacking before. The second part of the question is, how muscular can an average person get, height, weight, body fat, without using roids? I would use FFMI. That's sort of what FFMI is, height, weight, body fat percentage. I would say the average person can definitely get to 21 and probably to 22, but I think 23 is not something where the average person can always get to, which is about where I am. And then 24, definitely not everyone can get to. That is very, very big for a natural. And then 25 is like 1 in 1,000 genetics, 1 in 10,000, 1 in somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in there. It's hard to actually predict that. It's just guessing. But I would say 21 to 22 FFMI for the average person with 5 to 6 years of very, very solid and dedicated and disciplined training and diet and everything. 107, if I do a pivot week every 6 to 8 weeks, can I stick to the same exact exercises for months and months and years without running into the risk of a repetitive strain injury? Maybe. So some people, if they do a wide grip bench press, for example, they do like one session of that and they're just like, they're done. Their shoulders are just like, no, what are you doing? We're not made for this. Stop what you're doing. Other people can do that just years and years and they're completely fine. Same with squats, same with deadlifts, same with just about any movement. It really depends on the individual. Some people can handle a lot of volume and other people just can't handle any volume at all. It's just how it is. Unlike, a guillotine press where you're like bench pressing to your neck, the thought of that, just thinking of that movement messes up my shoulders. And other people, they're like, oh, it's the best pec exercise ever. Look at the EMG data. And I'm just like, what? No, okay? It's just not worth it. So it really depends. It's not about the pivot week. It's not about the time. It's about the exercise and your own physiology. 108, should I structure my workouts based on my limb length? I have short arms and long legs. You're going to be a good deadlifter. I would say maybe, but don't overthink things too much. For example, in the deadlift, you're going to have a harder time recovering just because it's more range of motion and you're going to be in a more bent over position, not necessarily rounded, but just you're going your hips are going to be more inclined, and maybe you're going to get more knee drive as well to get down to the bar because you have long legs and you have these little T-Rex arms. So yeah, you might want to do less frequent deadlifting just because it's going to beat you up more because of the range of motion and the mechanical disadvantage. You might want to switch to a rack pull if you're not interested in powerlifting, just because that is going to be perhaps a little bit easier to recover from and get you most of the benefits, probably. So it really just depends. I would say in some cases, yes, but I don't think programming should be like radically different for short-limbed or long-limbed people. Perhaps long-limbed people would be better with like front squats over back squats or something like that. But it's sort of very individual, and I think it's best to go by feel. What do you think of Vince Gironda's 10, 8, 6, 15? Some people do 20 instead of 15 routine. I like that. I like pyramiding up to a heavier set. I might do something a little bit heavier than 6, but it depends on the exercise. And then doing like one all-out, back-down pump style of set. I think that's a good way to train on just about any movement. You know, maybe not like lateral raises or something, but for most compound movements, I think pyramiding up and then doing one heavy back down set is something that does have a lot of value. You get the benefits of something called post-activation potentiation, which is basically science speak for after a heavy weight, a medium or light weight seems even lighter. So I think this can be a good way to train and is a very efficient way to gain muscle. 110, congrats. Thank you very much. I just wanted to know your opinion on whether I should incorporate running into my workouts if my goal is to build muscle. Thanks. If someone's goal was like pure hypertrophy, just muscle growth, I would probably have them do almost no running, unless it was a specific goal for them, in which case you're going to have to give something up. Running is tough to recover from. Running takes a lot of recovery effort, recovery resources from the body, just because of the impact and the inflammation response as well, especially if you're heavier. So basically, no. If you want to get big, you don't run. If you look at almost all the best bodybuilders in the world, natural or otherwise, most of them don't run for those reasons. Next question, is it necessary to work all parts of a muscle in the same session to reach great development, the 3 heads of the triceps, for example? Yes, it is, but as I said in the previous Q&A, most exercises are going to work both heads of the biceps, all 3 heads of the triceps, all 4 heads of the quads pretty much equally. Maybe some slight differences in activation based on your positioning, but I think most of these people who are like, this is a medial head, this is a long head, long headed might be the exception just because you get that stretch, but I think generally speaking this is just overcomplicating training and focusing too much on minutia. Even professional bodybuilders generally don't do this kind of stuff. They might put out content like this because it does well, like, oh, you need to be working this specific head of the triceps, and here's the best secret, how to do it. In reality, probably not. Box training, punch-focused contact deport, I guess you mean boxing, affect hypertrophy, especially on the shoulders. I would say it might help, unless you have like already a huge amount of development and it just like burns you out. But I would say for most people, this type of cardio, this kind of constant tension work can definitely help. Like cycling for quads or elliptical for the booty, or probably not running, as I said, because it's more muscle wasting than anything. But yeah, I say it can maybe have a small positive effect. I have pretty small hands. Do I have any disadvantages when lifting? You might not be able to do hook grip, just because if your hands are small, you can't get around the bar and you can't actually hook your thumb. It also you might have a weaker grip in general. It really just depends. But I would say for most movements, no. It's just going to be maybe your rows and your deadlifts that might suffer a little bit. Number 114, how good would you say your genetics are? It's hard nowadays to get a feel of how natural with about average genetics will look nowadays. You said nowadays twice, bro. I would say my genetics, it's hard to say just genetics good, bad, just because I did a whole video on this. I'll maybe link it in the card or description or whatever. But genetics is multifaceted. Like I had genetic strong points, shoulders, my traps attach pretty high, so I have more trap potential growth. My arms are naturally decently shaped. And, but, my quads, definitely nothing to write home about. Same thing for my abs, same thing for my lats, etc. So everyone has strong points, weak points, and it's hard to say. I would say my genetics are above average, just from a bodybuilding perspective. I have a pretty narrow waist, like probably around 30 inches right now, even though I'm a little bulked up. But in shape, I'm like 28 inches. So it depends on your frame, it depends on your hormone levels, depends on your muscle bellies, etc. And so it's hard to say, but I would say I have probably at least 90th percentile genetics when it comes to bodybuilding genetics, muscle growth, etc. 99%, I don't know, but it's probably somewhere above 90%. Number 115 is body recomposition possible? Can you gain muscle in a caloric deficit? Sorry if this has been asked before. It hasn't been asked, but I did do a full video, how to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. Yes, it is possible. It is absolutely possible. Anyone who says it is not possible has not read the research, because it consistently shows that young people, old people, people who train hard, people who don't train that hard, beginner athletes, intermediate athletes, even advanced athletes can gain muscle while losing fat. Okay, and this is without anabolic steroids and naturally. It might be harder, it might take longer, it might be a smaller effect, but it is absolutely possible. And anyone who says it's not possible, for whatever reason, they are either lying to you or they just don't know what they're talking about because they haven't read the actual research. Tons of papers. I'll link an article by Mendel Henselmans in the description below, and after you read that, you'll be pretty convinced, I think. 116, how do I safely build up to a big overhead press? I always seem to get injured when I do too many reps and sets in one session. I think you just answered the question. Don't do too many reps and sets in one session. Space it out a little bit. Don't go quite close to failure. It depends where the injury is. If it's an elbow, it's probably because it's actually a rotator cuff issue. You're getting a lack of stability, and so your elbow is getting stressed because it's wobbling. You might not even be able to see it, but it is. Wrist, it could be your grip width. Maybe if you're gripping too wide, it'll put stress on the wrist. Same thing with too narrow. Try to have this area be fairly vertical, fairly straight. It might be a narrow grip than you're used to. It might be a little bit wider. For most people, I would say a little bit narrower is going to be better. And I would say use a variety of rep ranges. Focus on your technique. Maybe use substitutes like seated dumbbell, Z press, perhaps Klokov press. It depends if it's a shoulder issue. It could also be a mobility issue. Do plenty of face pulls, plenty of external rotator work. Make sure your pecs are not too tight. I think that just about covers it. My wife has been emotionally abusive because she can squat, bench, and deadlift more than me. Any advice? Get stronger. Number 118 is swinging with the legs, not kipping, during pull-ups acceptable to get more reps. Again, I would say be consistent with it. If you cheat a little bit, get a little bit of momentum going to try to get over the bar, not the end of the world. It's not like your lats are going to grow a little bit less if it happens a little bit. You know what I mean? I think this might actually be a little bit better for growth, but the effect is going to be small either way. But I would say generally speaking, it's going to be fine. But if you do, just be consistent with it, and don't not cheat one set and then cheat the other set because you don't actually know if you're making progress. Number 119, when doing a 5x5, if I fail to get the 5th rep in set 3, 4, 5, should I lower the weight to achieve the 5th rep, or should I just maintain the weight and the same intensity? I would say this depends on your goals. If your goal is powerlifting and strength, maybe keep the weight the same because the intensity is going to be what you are targeting. But also check your program. Like if you're really powerlifting, maybe doing an all-out 5x5, to RPE 10 every single set, like a 5, 4, 4, 3, 3. I did that recently. I did a video on 5x5 up there. That might not be optimal for powerlifting just because you want to be fresher, you want to maintain bar speed, you don't want to have those grinding reps. But if you're bodybuilding, I would say you're going to want to go on the volume side of things, and therefore you want to keep getting those 5 reps, even if it means reducing the weight. To a certain extent, in bodybuilding, you are chasing volume and chasing fatigue and chasing failure, and so it really is a totally different mindset. And so I would say, yeah, it depends on your goals. All right, the next question, how are you going to manage this type of Q&A Answer everything Q&A. Once your channel subscriber count gets into the hundreds of thousands. I don't know. If anyone has any suggestions, please let me know. Maybe I'll just clone myself and buy a bunch of houses in Shenzhen and have an army of Geoffs answering questions. But in reality, I have no idea. It probably won't be feasible. Like right now I have 10,000 subscribers. At a certain point, it's going to be a lot higher. I don't know, 50,000. But even like 20,000, I can't answer 300 questions in a Q&A. Like, let's be realistic. So this might be the last Answer Everything Q&A, realistically speaking, maybe one more. But when I get over 200 questions, you know, for me to edit this kind of video, you have no idea. That's the thing. Before you create content, you don't know how much effort it takes to create the content. You see, like, okay, well, the clips are just stitched together. Something like this doesn't take as much involvement, but it's just long. It's just long to record, long to edit, long to upload, and then, you know, long to write all the timestamps, everything. So, yeah, I don't know. If anyone has any good suggestions, please let me know. Number 121, how to avoid biceps tendonitis and golfer's elbow. I'm prone to both and it sucks. SSSSS. No curls for the girls. Sad face. Yeah, so this is going to be tricky. I would say any kind of elbow issue, I generally prescribe high rep band pushdowns just to get a lot of blood into that area. Often tendon issues don't really resolve themselves. Like you'll take 2 weeks off from the gym and it'll be worse. You know, it sucks. It could be a knee, it could be an elbow, it could be an Achilles, could be anything, but they just don't freaking heal by themselves. You have to be very, very active when it comes to rehabbing that. So I would say, you know, do sets of 50 to 100, 5 to 10 times per day. And, you know, it's not really going for a pump. It's just going to get blood into the tendon, not to burn out the muscle, you know, not to actually build the triceps or build the biceps or anything, but just do super high reps with very light weight. You could even, you know, do that other kind of elbow movement. But generally speaking, I say push downs are going to be the best. And it can take time, so just be patient, stay under the threshold of injury, and don't piss it off. Next question, 122. What do you think of using rows and weighted chin-ups as strength progression for biceps and only doing finisher-style movements for isolation? I like this a lot. I slammed Ryan Humiston in his video for trash-talking the compound movements and progressive overload, but I think some of his movements do have some value as a finisher, supplementing those bigger compound movements. You shouldn't do only that kind of stuff, especially if you're natural, but I do think his channel, like I'm not saying his channel is absolutely useless, I'm just saying he's talking shit about something that is very, very important for natural lifters when he's not natural. So I would say this is fine. You know, do some heavy compound movements, more power building kind of thing, and then, you know, do 1 or 2 sets of just pump work to really fill the area with blood, with bloat, with creatine, or whatever else you have in your veins. 123, grats, thank you. Just curious how often you personally take rest days and if there is any specific scenario that would make you take a rest day. And do you ever take a day wherein you do nothing? So generally I don't like to do nothing. Just sitting here in the apartment and not even going out is kind of depressing. So I like to at least get in a walk if I take a day off. I took a day off like 3 or 4 days ago. I just had a headache. I almost never get headaches. I don't know why I got a headache. I don't think it was dehydration. Maybe I was like a little bit sick or something. So I just took the day off. You know, I knew I wasn't going to get anything done, you know, productively in the gym, so I just took the day off. And it just depends on my split as well. So I was doing push-pull legs for a while, which is going to have 1 day off a week. And if I felt good, I would just keep going. But eventually I train really hard. I train really close to failure for a decent amount of volume. And so I was just not recovering well. And so I switched, and I could just feel that. I could feel, okay, this split is done. It's not working anymore. I'm not really progressing. And so I switched to upper, lower with 3 days off per week. And after like a week of that, the pumps were insane. I just had so much more energy. I felt more excited about training. So I think going back and forth between high frequency and then more lower frequency phases can definitely be beneficial. 124, what volume range have you found optimal, as in how many sets per training session and per week. Thanks for the great content. No problem. So this is going to be body part dependent. My shoulders can take a lot of volume. Same for arms. But then if I do, I did 6 sets of RDLs 2 days ago, and like they're going to be sore for 2 or 3 more days. It's basically that for the week. So I think it really depends on the body part and the individual, and it's something you have to feel. You can go by soreness, you can go by how you are progressing, you can go by how you feel, and then you can go by the exercise as well, but it really is individual. I do give some recommendations in my book, but the recommendations are fairly broad just because everyone is a little bit different. I live in New York. I was born in New York, actually. And I exercise in my garage. Temperature outside is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so close to freezing. Is it safe to exercise in this weather? Do I need to warm up for more time? Yeah, you probably do need to warm up for more time. Again, just go by feel. It's better to warm up too much than too little. So I would say it might take an extra 10 minutes, but it's better to be on the safer side and do more warm-ups rather than just taking your usual warm-ups, feeling cold, and then pulling a muscle or worse. So definitely be conservative, but you can definitely still work out for sure. 126, it's good to see your channel growing. Thank you. My question is, how should one start training again after an injury? As I probably mentioned before, stay below the threshold of injury, see which movements you can do. Like if your knee hurts and you were doing a bunch of front squats, switch to low bar, switch to box squats, switch to maybe split squats. And this goes for almost any body part. Find which movements piss your body off. Okay, like I don't do low bar. It doesn't feel right for me. Some people do. Some people feel better on low bar. I'm not gonna say they're wrong. It's just not what works for me. So find out what works for you. That can be a whole video maybe. In my book, I do go into which movements might cause which injury, which Greg mentioned in his video, and he was like, "There's no way you can predict this." Yeah, there is. There absolutely is. If you analyze someone's training and they get a specific injury, it's always for a specific reason. Always. Injuries don't happen for no reason. They happen due to mechanical stress. And you can measure and see which movement actually caused that mechanical stress. It's not really that tricky. If you've introduced behind the neck, narrow grip push presses, and now your shoulders feel like hot garbage, well, maybe that was it. So I would say, see what works for you and then learn to experiment over time. 127, how do I train my whole body with a backpack filled with water bottles up to 60 pounds with access to a pull-up bar and chairs for dips? So yeah, pull-ups, dips, maybe push-ups as well. Perhaps you could curl it, maybe not 60 kilos. Perhaps you can get some extension stuff going. Squats, perhaps some RDLs, but that's pretty light. Maybe one-legged RDLs or something. But that might be a custom plan. So I write some really weird custom plans because they're actually custom. They're not cookie cutter. So basically some people just only have access to some really weird stuff. Like I'll have them, like film their house and I'll be like, oh, well, all right, we'll use that. And yeah, what is that? Oh, it's a 20-pound Atlas stone or something. Oh, we'll use that. No, so it's, be creative and, you can still make gains. You just might have to be a little bit more creative than you usually are in a gym. 128, what to do with dainty hands and wrists? I don't know how to answer that question. Just, again, don't do what gets them injured. If something causes pain, don't do it. It's probably not wrist strength. It's probably poor technique or poor execution. Also, what is superior, lowering body fat and mastering body weight exercises or jumping straight into weightlifting? You can lower body fat when you're doing weightlifting. That's sort of a separate thing. As for body weight exercises versus weightlifting, again, it's up to you. There's no minimum standard for weightlifting. And actually, it's maybe easier because you can scale the weight up and down. Whereas, for pull-ups, I guess you can use a band assistance or something, but for a lot of calisthenic movements, it's very hard to scale. Whereas, a biceps curl, very easy to scale. You just use heavier or lighter dumbbells. It's sort of the whole benefit of the gym. 129. How hard is it, physically and mentally, psychologically and physically, to diet down to 10% body fat? It depends where you are. If you are naturally leaner, then it won't be too difficult. It might be harder to sustain, but getting there shouldn't take, anything extreme. Whereas if you are 20%, going to be harder. If you're naturally 30%, like you just float up to 30%, given your genetics, given your lifestyle, given your choices, and the combination of those, it's going to be really hard. And if you're like 40%, if you're naturally very on the, I don't want to say endomorph because I think that's really overused and not quite right, but if you're naturally just on the thicker side, let's put it that way, you're probably never going to get a 10%. Okay, it's a lot leaner than people think. Even if you're 30%, you're probably never going to get a 10%. I've had potential clients, I asked them what their goals were in the initial consultation, and they said, "Oh, I want to be 5 to 9% body fat," and I'm like, "Okay," and then they send me their picture, and they're like 35 to 40% body fat, and I have to inform them that their goal is, like stage ready, basically. So it just depends on your genetics, your starting point, your habits in place. So it's hard to give a set rule. For some people, it's actually, they are naturally 10 to 12% body fat. Not very many people, less than 1% of the population for sure, but some people they don't have a lot of hunger, they are naturally very active, and so they actually tend to gravitate towards being that lean, and so it legit requires basically no effort to get to 10%, because they're already there. But if you're much higher, it's going to be much more difficult. For me personally, I tend to float to maybe 14 to 17%, maybe 18%. And, if I get to 10%, it's going to take effort for sure. Like it's not going to be something I can do eating purely instinctively. I'll have to, make some meals smaller. I'll have to maybe skip some meals. I'll have to perhaps up my cardio or start doing cardio. But it won't be like back-breaking. For me to get to 8% would be like pretty tough. And then 7%, oof, like it gets way harder the leaner you get. And 6% would be really shitty. All right, 130. Would it be sufficient if I just read your book and don't watch YouTube or Quora on a regular basis because my job is very occupying? Yeah, the book is a standalone product. It has everything you need. You don't need the YouTube channel. YouTube channel might help, but it has pictures in the book for a reason. I don't link to the YouTube channel because when I wrote the book, I didn't have a YouTube channel. And I didn't even have a Quora account. So it is a standalone product, and you don't need anything else. You don't need any other books. It should be everything you need. It says everything you need on your fitness journey, and it actually means that because you don't need anything else. So yeah, I would say it's probably the best fitness resource, the best single fitness resource that a person can have. Yeah, that's bragging, but it's also accurate. All right, 131. How would a 4-day training split look like while hitting all the muscles twice in a week? I would say upper lower. I did a full video on that. I will link it up there or somewhere else. But if you want to do a double frequency 4 times per week, upper lower is going to be the best way to do it. Yeah, easy question. 132. What muscles do snatch and clean and jerk work, and how should an athlete program them in his or her workout? It works basically the posterior chain, so hamstrings, glutes, spinal erectors, but then also the traps from the shrugging up, the rotator cuff, the lats a little bit to keep the bar close, but not that much. And as for how an athlete should program it, if I had an athlete, I probably wouldn't have them do either. In doing a snatch from the ground or a full clean followed by a full jerk probably is not going to be the best option for most athletes. It requires a lot of technique, a lot of precision. You have to be very precise with where you are putting the bar. And if you mess up a little bit, you could really mess yourself up, especially with heavy weights. And then it requires just a long learning curve. It's and mobility as well to get in the starting position, to get in the overhead position. And so I would say for most athletes, they're probably not worth doing. There are better movements that can get you better results. Could be a power clean, could be a high pull, could be a Chinese pull, could be a push press, could be a lot of different variations, which are just going to be easier to learn and to master and get you just as much benefit. 133. How important is feeling the muscle really? I don't feel my back muscles most of the time. I would say this depends on the exercise and depends on the muscle. I don't feel my quads working when I squat, especially for low reps. It's just not going to happen. Maybe for sets of 10 to 12, yeah, but sets of 5 to 6, your quads probably won't be felt. Okay, it's working your soul, it's working your everything, you know? But in something like a curl, especially for higher reps, I would say, yeah, you probably should be feeling it in the muscle. Something like a high rep row or a standing cable pullover, I think you should probably be feeling something in your back. Otherwise, you maybe are not activating the muscles properly, which I think can actually matter. 134, I've been working out for like 1.4 years now, fully natural, and my gains are great. 1.4 years, that's very exact. I just want to know, how long will it take to achieve a physique like yours? Smiley face. Maybe not a good goal, okay? Again, I'm genetically above average, not like amazing, but, I have my own proportions, my own strengths, my own weaknesses, and I think it's probably not the best to compare your physique to mine. If I had to give an answer, well, I don't really know your genetics, but I'll try to give an answer. I would say it's going to take at least 3 or 4 more years. I didn't train perfectly, especially in the beginning, but I've trained pretty well, especially from a hypertrophy standpoint. So, yeah, it depends where you are. It depends on a lot of factors, but I would say almost no one is going to achieve a 23 FFMI within a year of training, and probably not even within 2 years of training. To really look impressive as a natural, you're probably looking at 4 to 5 to 6 years, maybe 3 if you nail everything. 135, how have you seen the most success in breaking through plateaus, particularly for the bench press? I've been stuck at the same strength levels for months now. So it's hard to say without actually seeing your program and seeing what you've been doing. Obviously, you're going to have to change something. It could be more, could be less, could be high reps, could be low reps, could be a different accessory movement. Could be your sleep, could be your diet, could be an endless number of things that I just don't know. So this is impossible for me to really answer. I would say check your technique, and then check your weak point. Are you weak off the chest? Are you weak through the mid-range? Is it a lockout issue? Maybe, but probably not. So it really just depends, and then see how much volume you've been doing. Do you feel beat up? If you feel fine, like you feel like you're not doing anything, add more volume. That's probably going to be the best way. If you feel really beat up, if your elbows are beat up, your shoulders, you're having trouble sleeping, you're just doing a lot of work already, I think reducing it can probably be a good idea. So, yeah, hard to answer, but it's somewhere in there. How much volume rep range is optimal for leg adductors and abductors? Almost nobody in the fitness industry talks about this part of the legs. I agree. They are very, very underrated. Quads get so much love, hamstrings, glutes a lot as well. But adductors, abductors, the adductors are freaking massive. They're incredibly important. They're very, very important for the squat to extend the hip, especially in the bottom position, especially for hip extension as well when you're doing some kind of deadlift or RDL. So, yeah, they're very underrated. In terms of sets, it's hard to say because, again, squatting is going to work them, deadlifts, single leg work. And so, I'd say a little bit of adductor work can help, doing that like a open-closed kind of machine. It's called Good Girl, Bad Girl, which is the best name ever. #sexist. But I would say you probably don't need too much work on top of your squats, your deadlifts, your split squats, lunges, etc. But maybe 5 to 10 per week for each, somewhere in there. You can do them as a warm-up or as a finisher. Both are okay. I tend to do them as a warm-up just because I had hip issues, and it seems to help just warming that entire area up, just getting some opening, getting some closing, really just, getting that movement going, and it seems to help quite a bit. All right, the next one, Peter Griffon from Family Guy, is he natty or not? Well, technically he's artificial. You'd never see a Peter Griffon in the wild, I hope. So I'm going to go with not natty, obviously. Look at those curves. You don't get muscle bellies like this naturally. Come on, how is this even a question? All right, the next one, reps and speed. Could you talk about this, please? I assume you mean bar speed and not the drug. So it really depends. I think a lot of people, this is probably the best way to check to see how close you actually are to failure. Sometimes a set will feel a lot worse than it looks. And so many people are guilty, even myself, are guilty of just like bitching out on a set when they could have gotten more reps because it felt shitty, but the bar speed was still good. And I would say it depends on your goals. Bodybuilding, hypertrophy, you're going to want to go closer to failure, but something like powerlifting training or weightlifting, probably not as close to failure. Probably 2 reps in reserve, 3 reps in reserve. But yeah, just know where you are and what bar speed means for you. Some people, like in the bench press, their second to last rep will fly up, and then their last rep will be a complete grinder. And so it really just depends on the person. 139, there is nothing more handsome / beautiful in terms of outcome than a mixture of European and Eastern Asian, in my opinion. I mean, when are we going to see Jeffrey Verity Jr. winking smiley face? Actually, we're going to be trying for a girl, which I'm not sure I should say on camera because, if we have a boy and we keep him, whoops, sorry, bro, and he sees this video 10 years later, he's like, 10 years from now, of course I have 1 million subs, and, he's scrolling through this Q&A, and he's, like, curious about what daddy was doing online, and he sees this, and he's like, now he's all sad because he thinks we wanted a girl. Sorry, bro. You were our second choice. Get wrecked! All right, 140. As a relatively new lifter, is it bad if I feel like vomiting with 2 hems and nauseated when I get to 15 to 20 reps in the squat? That's pretty normal. Lactic acid is something that's really interesting because everyone has a little bit of a different reaction to it. Some people lose their lunge. Other people, like, their teeth hurt. Other people get headaches. Other people get, like, joint pain. It's all over the place. So, now your reaction to lactic acid and a deprivation of oxygen. Yeah, so it's fine. It's normal. It's one of the more common ones. And this might get better over time, or it might not. Everyone is a little bit different. I would say you don't need to do 12 to 15 reps to gain muscle or gain strength, certainly. So it just depends if you want to punish yourself. Like, sometimes I'll do that kind of stuff just to see if I can, but I would say it's probably not necessary. Hope you're having a good day so far. Thank you. My question is, when we're told, look for the exercise that works best for you, does this mean the one that gives you A, the best mind-muscle connection, feel, or B, the best results? This one takes a while, and you can't be sure which one of the exercises that you actually did that worked. So, good question. Again, compound movements, you're not always going to feel. You might not feel your squats in your quads when you're doing them. I would say soreness is a pretty good indicator. For example, if you're squatting and your inner thigh, your adductors are getting sore, it's probably working more inner thigh, more adductors. It's just where the soreness is, and so it's where it's going to be building up. That's a very, very strong correlation right there. On isolation, I would say mind-muscle connection is going to be pretty important. But on compound, maybe it's not the biggest thing. So, and you were right, it is very difficult to track what is actually giving you results. And this is where I think a training log is absolutely vital. And then also maybe taking measurements or actually just tracking your progress in terms of strength and size, etc. And, seeing what seems to correlate the most. And also, don't change your training up too much. If one week you do front squats, then Anderson squats, then low bar, then high bar, then pause front squats, and you're just split squats, and you're just every week is a different exercise. Wow, you gained an inch on your thighs, but you have no idea what actually caused that. 142, almost there. What would you classify as bad genetics? Again, it's multifaceted. I think a lot of people don't give themselves the opportunity because they classify themselves with bad genetics because they have like one weak part, or they tend to put on fat more easily, or whatever. And, they don't actually look at their genetic strong points. Almost everyone has some genetic strong points. So it really just depends. And you don't know if you have bad genetics until 5 years of training. Okay? You can maybe get better results the first or second year of training if you have good genetics, but you don't know for sure until at least 3 years, if not probably 5 years, of near optimal training. Okay? You just don't know. And there are plenty of professional bodybuilders that have just glaring genetic flaws in terms of muscle bellies, and possibly in terms of natural testosterone production as well. They just superseded that with a big dose of unnatural hormones. So it really just depends. You can get around a lot, and so many people sell themselves short, and they think they have bad genetics because they have a shit physique, but they didn't actually give themselves a chance to work and develop a good physique. It's not just about genetics. It's one part, it's important, but it's not the only part, and never use it as an excuse. 143, I can't afford to eat more than 50 grams of protein. Is it okay to build muscle? So if you mean 50 grams total, that is a staggeringly low amount of protein, okay? That is often what I might have in a meal, okay? And what a lot of people might have in a meal, natural or otherwise. So if that is your total protein per day, I would say no, that's not going to be optimal. You're going to want to be double or maybe even triple depending on your body weight. If it means how much you are supplementing, like I'm taking 50 grams of protein powder or something, then maybe it's optimal depending on how much protein you're getting from food. So it really just depends. But 50 grams total, no. Okay, you might see some growth, but I would say it's not going to be optimal. And the second question, I am a beginner. I had a partial tear in ACL. What exercise should I avoid? Anything with like twisting is probably not going to be good. Leg extensions also maybe not good. Squats might be okay. Again, it's so hard to diagnose injuries when I have zero information about you. Honestly, Google might be better than this, just because I am too lazy to Google every single question that I don't know. So I don't really know. I would say go by feel and maybe see a professional face-to-face as well. 144, what do you recommend on lagging body parts or muscle imbalances? Like, how do you train them? For example, upper chest. Well, I did a whole video on upper chest. I will maybe link it above or just search my channel. Maybe that's just easier. Frequency and activation. So if your muscle is lagging, it's probably because another muscle is taking over, and you need to learn how to activate that lagging part in order to fully engage it in compound movements or in any movement at all. I would say frequency as well. If your chest is lagging, you're not going to get a bigger chest with like 1 day a week. Okay, it's just not going to happen. So I would say a frequency of 2 to 3 times per week for most body parts, but possibly 4 to 5 times a week for more resilient muscle groups. If you have lagging rear delts, you should not be training them once per week. That should probably be a 3, 4, or 5 times per week fiesta of just attacking the shit out of them. Again, it depends on the body part. Traps, rear delts, very resilient. Abs, also very resilient for most people. Forearms, triceps to a certain extent. Biceps also to a certain extent. Lower body typically takes longer to recover, but calves are usually pretty resilient as well. 145, though I know you're a hypertrophy enthusiast, that makes it sound so classy, doesn't it? How passionate or are interested are you in your strength? Are you planning to pursue some strength goals ahead? Yeah, so I am always interested in strength, even if I tend to take a more higher rep, hypertrophy-oriented style. That's mostly because I'm just better at that. Like I can do 10 reps with 90% on a lot of movements, just because I'm more slow twitch, and I could just, if I lower the weight, I can just keep doing reps and reps and reps, and then I raise the weight a little bit, and I just can't even do one. It's just how my body is. Probably from my running background, but possibly just genetics as well. So it's tough pursuing something that you know you're not good at. Like I'm never going to be a top power lifter. Like I've deadlifted 205, squatted 135, and benched a whopping 115 in terms of kilos. So it's not like I'm gonna, be a world beater. And I like doing things I'm good at. I'm just like anyone. However, I do have plans to increase my strength, and my next 10-week block is going to be mostly focused on strength, sort of like a power building type of program. More on that in a future video. 146, how to train for muscle strength and endurance, like how to optimally train for an MMA fight. That might be a full video. I would say, again, you have to measure the stress and make sure you're recovering well. If you try to do both with too much volume, it's just going to wreck yourself. So train by ear. And again, this is super hard for me to answer because it's a case-by-case individual type of thing. 147, what kind of eating habits would you recommend for people with a fast metabolism? Is it better to space out the quantity of meals over a period of time, or to eat large amounts in a strict interval? I I would say whatever helps you get in the calories, man. As long as you're eating 3 times per day, frequency isn't that important. If you like 3,000 calorie meals and that gets you to your surplus, that's fine. If you like 5 times 600, that's fine, or 6 times 500. I wouldn't really go beyond 6 times per day for most people. It just becomes kind of ridiculous in terms of planning everything out and cooking and cleaning and all that BS. But I would say anywhere from 3 to 6 meals per day, and as long as your calories are okay, the minutia in there doesn't really matter that much. All right, the next question: when did you lose your V card? I know, but you said you would answer all the questions, so I asked. Smiley face with the D is like the big, not that kind of D, the letter. Anyway, it was summer camp, and that's that's all the detail I will go into. Try to keep it classy. There will be no Technique Tuesday on this one. 149. What is your current training split and workouts look like? So I was doing push-pull legs for a while. That's what I sort of tend to gravitate towards. I really like that twice per week frequency, but more focus on a particular body part on a particular day. For a while, I was doing high frequency. Like back in this time last year, I was doing, 5-6 times per week, full body. And then I was doing upper lower for a little while. And I recently started a new program, which I will maybe do a video about, but not for a little while till I see if it's actually working. All right, 150, is stretching really necessary if one does strength training? I'd say it depends on your goals. If you're a martial artist, yeah, it's probably necessary. Actually, I read an article recently. It was maybe the Sydney ballet squad. They just stopped stretching. Maybe I'll try to find it and put it in the description below. But they just stopped stretching. Ballerinas stopped stretching. Like the people who probably need more mobility than anyone, they just stopped stretching. And they actually were fine. They actually improved their rate of injury. Their rate of injury went down because they stopped stretching. So I would say for most people, stretching is not necessary. In fact, I think stretching is one of the most overdone things ever. It's been proven to not really help injury. It's been proven to not help performance at all. It actually hurts performance if you do it right beforehand in excessive amounts. So I would say for most people, it's not really necessary. If it makes you feel good, fine. If it helps to improve a specific area, fine. But you don't need to stretch out before you lift weights unless you have a specific issue. Maybe stretch your hip flexors before squatting, or activate the back before bench pressing, or whatever. But it really needs to be a case-by-case basis, not just like, oh, I'm going running, so I'm stretching my quads or anything like that. It needs to be specific and logical. All right, 151. We all know that to build muscle, we should aim for 1 gram of protein per body weight pounds. Do we know that? I also understand that real food is better than supplements. I take 50 grams post-workout AM and occasionally 25 to 50 grams in the PM, and the rest protein I get through food. I weigh 220 pounds. Looking to cut. Does using too much protein powder hurt my gains? What is your take on protein powder? What brand do you use? All right, so there's a lot there. First, 1 gram per pound is the gold standard, but it's actually wrong. Most of the research points to a little bit less being fine for muscle growth. You might be fine in terms of getting like a satiation benefit from going up a little bit. And perhaps some people, especially if you're older, you might want to break through that anabolic resistance by getting bigger boluses of protein, which might lead to a higher protein intake. But I don't think 1 gram of protein, 1 gram per pound should be the gold standard. It's not really based in science. Actually, science points to a lower amount being fine. As for 50 grams and then 25 to 50 grams, that sounds fine, completely okay. Does using too much protein powder hurt your gains? No. It's really hard to eat too much protein. You don't need that much, but if you eat more, it's not like your kidneys shut down unless you have some kind of pre-existing condition, so I wouldn't worry about that. What is your take on protein powder? I just sort of told you I eat it probably, 75 to 100 grams per day, maybe. I don't know, quite a bit. Just because I'm busy and I don't want to go shopping or order food, I just have protein powder and that's enough for me. I work 12 to 14 hours per day, so I just don't want to cook because I'm lazy and busy. Sort of in that order. As for what brand I use, it varies. Basically, whatever is on sale. I don't think like any particular protein powder is going to be magically wonderful. Let's see. Right now I'm on anabolic. It's reversed, but it's Kevin Levroni's signature series, something. And it's a mix of casein and egg whites and whey and stuff like that. So I'm definitely partial to casein. I generally recommend that over whey, except for post-workout. Whey is like candy. It breaks down so quickly, especially on an empty stomach, that it is in and out of the system so fast, it might not be optimal for growth. And so I think casein in a lot of cases is going to be better, especially if you're cutting, as it tends to fill you up a lot more. It's a lot thicker. It's thicker than a bowl of oatmeal. It's so you mix it up, and it's you have to add a lot of water, and you mix it up, and it's actually pretty good. I like chocolate, but obviously that's up to you. And yeah, that about covers that one. All right, that is all for this Q&A. Make sure to like the video. This took a ton of work. Subscribe to the channel if you are not already for some reason. If you happen to see this video in search, ha ha ha, yeah, right. And I hopefully see you in the next video. Peace. So I've been informed that my singing is quote-unquote cringe.
And therefore I'm never gonna sing again.